What's up, guys? Welcome back to the vlog. So I was going through the YouTube channel yesterday and I realized I have 86 videos up on the channel. So I'm feeling a little nostalgic and I wanted to go back and revisit the very first video that I ever did. And it was all about design process and creative workflow. Since the last time I talked about it, I've started my own business since then. I've done a lot of freelance work since then. The guts of it are still there and they're still relevant, but a couple of things have just changed along the way that I wanted to share with you guys. First off, what is a design process or a creative workflow? It's basically the framework for which you approach problem solving through design or through which you approach a creative project. It helps you stay efficient. It helps you weed through ideas to get to the very best idea, and then it helps you while you're developing those ideas as well. And starting off, it's all about, especially in like the business, the client. So I start off with a creative meeting and kind of from that creating a design brief or a creative brief. This isn't where I'm actually writing the brief. This is where I'm meeting with whoever I'm designing for, and I'm just asking relevant questions like, who are they? What's some history behind their company if I'm designing for a company logo, or what's the history of the product of what's been developed. And that helps me get backstory. It helps me identify the issue, like the problem that needs to be solved with the design. And it helps get me information. It's basically like research, but with the client. My second step in my process is actually where I'm writing the brief, but I'm sitting down to identify the message and the goal. So this is basically where I'm identifying communication points, like key communication points. Some of the questions I asked during this part of the process is, what am I communicating? What do I want? Like, what's the ultimate goal? What's the point of the whole thing? Where do I want to push people to? And then as I'm doing that, I'm sitting down and I'm writing this out in a brief, and I'm identifying key problems, key communication points, key goals that I want to achieve through the project. As I'm writing the brief, I'm identifying those things and setting them out in a way that makes sense. So 3, now that I have the brief, this is where I really start to get into the process of thinking about design and actually getting into the heart of things. This is where I start to sit down and I'm breaking down the brief into components. So key themes throughout the thing, if we're talking about a concert, what kind of music is it? And I'm kind of identifying those themes that are going to run throughout the design. And that's really where I get my starting point for the genre of design, I guess you could say, that I'm going for with what I'm creating. Once I have those themes and I kind of know where I'm going with things, this is where I choose what I can communicate. Trying to communicate too much hurts the design, but you want to make sure that you're communicating the most important things. So I identify what I can communicate, and then I prioritize that in order of importance. And obviously the things at the top of that priority list are going to be the things that are the focus of the design, that take the key point of interest for the whole design. So once I have my components and my themes, and once I've broken down and prioritized the communication aspect of the design piece, this is really where I get into the brainstorming phase of things. And I always break brainstorming down into 3 phases. There's inspiration, adaptation, and ideation. So inspiration is basically where I'm looking at some other things, and I'm at a point now in my design knowledge where I'm not necessarily looking at other people's designs for concerts or looking at other people's designs for whatever it is they're advertising. I'm really looking more at elements and how elements play with each other and what those elements communicate when they play with each other. But then there's adaptation. How can I adapt those ideas to my own style? How can I adapt those elements to the client's style? And really, how can I make something new out of what I've been inspired by? The last thing I want to do is copy somebody else's work, but looking at other people's work for ideas is great and it's awesome, and I think it's something that's needed. I think you need to break out of your box and look at other people's work sometimes and look at other aspects of design. But at the same time, you want to take those things that you're inspired by and adapt them to your style and create something new out of them. You don't want to copycat somebody else's artwork unless you're learning something, in which case go for it. But when you're thinking about a client's design, you don't want to look like everybody else. You don't want to do something like everybody else. So you're thinking about how you can adapt those things. And then ideation. Ideation for me is where I start to sketch out those ideas and I start to put things onto paper and get a basic framework, a basic layout for whatever I'm designing. This is a cool phase because this is really where you can push and pull within a design concept and kind of work things out, problem solving, and just figuring out the layout and how things work on paper and how things relate to each other, objects and scale, spacing. Now as I start to think about the design, this is really where I begin gathering materials and organizing things out to where I need them before I sit down and start putting everything together digitally. So I'm listing out what I need, I'm gathering those materials and organizing them in a way that makes sense. I'm fact checking myself to make sure I have the right times, the right dates, the right address information, where everything is going to be, so that when I go to put that into the design, I don't have to interrupt myself to do that. Everything's already fact checked. I know everything is what it's supposed to be. And then really I'm weeding through, what elements I do want, what elements I don't want, what information I want, what elements I may not want. The next parts go really quick. This is where I begin to implement the design. So I'm taking those digital elements, I'm taking that information, I'm taking that communication, and I'm putting it together into the design. I'm actually looking at it, I'm moving things around, I'm figuring out where things go, and this is actually the design, the creative hands-on design phase of my process. Before I ever give it to the client, before the client ever sees anything from me, I sit down and critique and review my own design. So I may take, 3 or 4 hours away from the design, come back, I'll put it up on the wall, I'll put it up on a screen somewhere, and I'll sit down and actually critique it as if I'm the client, as if I'm looking through the client's eyes. What works, what doesn't work? Do I like this color palette? Does this color palette match the brand? Is it brand centric with the client and what they're trying to achieve? Does it accomplish their goals? Does it communicate the right information? Is it a good layout? Does everything relationally make sense within the design? And that's kind of what I'm doing at this point. Once I feel really comfortable with the design, I've self-critiqued, maybe I've gotten somebody else to take a look at it, then I start the presentation phase. So I'll put together the presentation the way I like to put together a presentation that I feel is going to make the most sense to the client, that's going to communicate how what I've designed achieves their goals, how it relates to their brand. And then at that point, I'll present it to the client for feedback. So this is where I sit down with the client, I walk through the presentation, we talk and discuss, and we have a back and forth about what's been designed. And then if there are any revisions, this is where the client communicates that to me. And then I'll go into the revision phase, which is basically where I go back to the design board. I sit down, I begin to move around what the client has talked about. I begin to take a second look at that. Once all of the revisions have taken place, then I do a final presentation where I present the final product to the person I'm designing for. If they work for a company with multiple employees, maybe I present it to a board, or maybe I present it to the heads of that company, the people who are going to be doing it. Then it's time to develop and execute deliverables. So this is where I'm actually exporting what I've done, and it may be an export to a digital format, maybe an export to a printable format. If we're talking logos, it may be an EPS, a PDF, a PNG, a JPEG. It all just depends on what it's being used for, but this is where I start to execute those deliverables. Export everything out, quality check, and make sure that I'm sending the client the best that I can. In the last phase of my design process, and this is something that a lot of designers miss out on, is I do a debrief and follow up with the client. Do you like your design? Do you like what I've delivered? What could I do in the future to make the process easier? And then also, do you need anything else? This is the upsell portion of the project, kind of a little bit, where I'm like, do you need anything else? Do you need digital Facebook ads for this thing you're doing? Do you need print material? Do you need business cards? Do you need stationery? That all really depends on the client. I'm never pushy about that. I just like them to know the services that I've offered. Sometimes you can do this through email, sometimes you can do it in person, but you definitely want to do a debrief and follow up with them to make sure that they're happy with the service. That's it, guys. That's my creative process in a nutshell when I begin to approach a project. I hope that helped you out. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you can kind of glean something from that. This is such an important part of being a designer is knowing your process and how your process works. So I definitely hope you'll take this, you'll put your process down to paper, you'll understand it a little further, and that it helps you be a better designer. Thanks so much for watching, liking, commenting, and subscribing. You can click here to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. I hope you will. I love you guys. I love that you took the time to watch this video. Again, I hope it helped you out. You can click here to watch the first episode of the vlog where I talk about kind of the new vlog and what we'll be talking about going forward. And yeah, that's it. I'll see you guys next time. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.